Okay, so let's continue. Shulchan Aruch. Hefsei Shemayim mutar ledaber behem kagon cheshbonot shel mitzvah. And on that we have lifsok tzedakah Yud Aleph. We're in the Magen Avraham. Yud Aleph lifsok tzedakah. V'afal gav de'ein makdishin. So here's quoting the Ram. Right, the ein makdishin, k'mosh katuv b'siman shin lamed tet. That is mamash in the Shulchan Aruch. It says we don't makdish on Shabbat. So chadaitka, it's holding hainu kli yadua the mixik mechakumemchar. That's where it's a kli yadua, that it looks like mechakumemchar, when it looks like you're doing business because there's a particular item that you're makdish. Well, that's the Rabbeinu Chananel. Aval lo asru lechayev atzmo b'dibur legavoa el dekashali, says the Ran. Ha kishemarich atzmo na'im mechayev atzmo v'asurat kan lashon hara. Okay, that's just all the Ran. Va'ayim bebeis Yosef ma shetiretz. Right, we saw the Beis Yosef made an explanation. The lididei asur lakdish tas. Now it would come out that according to the Rabbeinu Chananel, it would be when it's only according to the Beit Yosef, who said that it's a kli yadua. It would be asur lakdish tas. It would be forbidden to lakdish an actual item. You couldn't like give an actual a tas is like a plate, a metal plate. B'Shabbat lebeit knesset. Aval the kolbo katvu davka hekdish mizbeach o lebeit kabayet asur. But the kolbo seem to be saying it's davka to the temple, but not to modern day things. The Yotze mi reshut the reshut gava, because it goes out of his reshut and becomes the temple's thing. But then it would be, according to the kolbo, it would be mutter. In other words, it's not so clear that the kolbo was a support, as the Beit Yosef was saying, for his opinion. Kolbo was saying something different. He's saying it's not that it's kli yadua, it's that it's when it goes to the temple, only to the temple is what's forbidden, because then it goes to a different reshut. Aval. No, there's Sefer Torah. Oh, atara mutar lefi sha'adayin ein miyachadim shum davar sheyotze mirishuto ad kan lashana. But when you makdish a Sefer Torah or atara, that's mutar because nothing is gone out of your reshut. V'nirali kavanato. This is now finally we're saying this is finally the Magen Avraham talking. V'nirali kavanato da hakdishot didan. Ninhu, that are what we are when we give money, it's devar chulin, it's nothing to do with the temple. Kamosha katav be choshen mishpat Siman tzadi hey v'yesh lekol Yisrael chelik behen. They're not really the temples because actually everybody owns them. Yesh lekol Yisrael chelik behen, and that's what it means. It doesn't go out of his reshut. Im kain lo yatzam reshuto. So it never really went out of his reshut, because if you give something to the Beit Knesset, that's the way I understand it. If you give something to the Beit Knesset, it's still yours in a sense, because it's the Kehilas, and you're a member of the Kehillah. So you also have a say in what gets done with this thing. If they decide they want to sell it to buy another Sefer Torah, so the money, that's your money. It's the Kehillah's money, and you're part of the Kehillah. So it never really went out of your reshut to somebody else's reshut. So therefore, it's not like Mechaku Memchar. It's not like a real sale. It's not a final sale. The Yesh la Hamakdish Gam Kein Chelik Bo. Can nearly because I still even though I makdish it to the to the Beit Knesset, I still have a chelik in it. V'lo kaharav Beit Yosef. In other words, he's saying basically the kolbo is not saying the same thing as the Beit Yosef. The kolbo was saying that it didn't go from your reshut to another reshut, and that's why it's mutter. And the Beit Yosef was saying if I remember correctly, what did the Beit Yosef say? But he said, did he say Kli Yadua? No, that was the wait. Okay, fine. No, that was not the that was the
That was Rabbeinu Hananel.
It was Rabbeinu Hananel that said Kli Yadua, right?
Yeah.
And then the Beit Yosef, and then the Ran didn't like it, and then the Beit Yosef said that a person is a special case. That a person is a special case. In other words, the kolbo is not like the Rabbeinu Hananel. Let's get that. That's the point. Rabbeinu Hananel said it's a Kli Yadua, and if it's not a Kli Yadua, then it's permitted. And the kolbo said, well, if you're giving it to hektish, then it's different because it's going out of your reshus. But it's not going out of your reshus when you're giving tzedakah. So therefore, there'd be a machloket in din. According to the kolbo, I could give a tas. I could give a metal plate to the Beit Knesset because it's not really a giving. I own it still partially. I'm still shaykh to it. Whereas according to Rabbeinu Hananel, it's a Kli Yadua. It's a specific thing and it'll be forbidden. So there's a nafkamina. Now look at the Igros motion.
There could be another nafkamina if I'm only visiting that congregation and I don't get a part of it.
And then you give anyway. Interesting. Yeah.
Or are you giving it away?
It feels like from the Kolbo's language, he thinks that you, as a Jew, still have a chelek in that communal thing. Like it feels like he's not using language which is about your communal involvement in that specific community.
Yeah, he does. You mean when you said the Kolbo, you meant to say the Magen Avram.
Yep.
Yes, because right, the Magen Avram. You're right. You're 100% right, Mimi. The Yesh lekol Yisrael chelek behen. It's not just my example was the Beit Knesset, but you're right. I a little bit twisted it. He's saying all of the Jews have it, whereas the things you get to the temple is not really the Jews anymore. It's God's. It's shy to the temple. So look at the Igros Moshe, very short. He quotes the whole Magen Avram, and then at the end he says, "You see where I am with Magen Avram."
Yeah.
The Magen Avram, the Yesh, the Makdish Gam Kain Chelek Bo. I have part of it. He says Tamua. He says this is surprising. Devadai asur la'adam limkor af rak chelek liot shutaf im acher b'tzarechiyah. He says, why are you telling me it's not like mechak u'memkar? Many times people buy and sell just a chelek, and you're not going to tell me that that's permitted on Shabbos. I can't. What I can sell, because it's not a full sale, I'm allowed to sell my chair partially to somebody, and will be, I have an apartment in Costa Rica, and I'm going to sell half of it. So we're going to split the time with my friend, and I can sell half of it to him. I can do that on Shabbat? No, obviously I can't. So why isn't it similar to Mechak u'Memkar?
I mean, it makes intuitive sense that tzedakah is both different than hekdesh and is different from mekach memkar, right? Because it is one directional, but at the same time, it doesn't have the kedusha that's associated with the Beit HaMikdash. So it's not transactional, and it's also not the temple.
Well, I also
and therefore it's mitzvah.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Part of what's different, like even beyond the sort of like obviously religious distinctions when we're talking about hekdesh stuff, I think it's more also just like what you're actually doing with your speech act, right? Is part of the notion that like with non-hekdesh things, you haven't in and of like committing to something and doing nothing else actually transferred anything, right? You've made a promise to transfer something, but it feels like the main distinction that's being drawn in a lot of these is that like when you consecrate something, like you have actually.
Well, what about I give an actual metal plate to the town. I come into the shul on Shabbos with a metal plate, and I say, "This is for the shul." So the Rabbeinu Hananel would say it's forbidden, and the Kolbo would say it's permitted, and the base and the Magen Avraham is saying it's permitted because it's still really yours. You have a shaykhus to it, and the Rav Moshe says, but so what? There's plenty of sales where I still have a shaykhus to it.
Well, there's also, I mean, interesting things like whatever. I think part of the stuff vis-a-vis tzedakah and some of the things as opposed to mekach and memkar, there's an interesting question of how distanced we get from the theoretical ikari concerns of what it is that we're worried about, right? That there is both, I think, in general, this notion that develops sort of more separate from the malacha consideration, that like exchanges of property is not something you do on Shabbos, even for less businessy reasons. But I think also a notion that like, both when we're operating in a less formalist standpoint, that like things that are more detached from business, that are about giving, is like less problematic and further distanced from what we're trying to avoid than actual business interactions. And that also, if you do understand it in more formalist sense of concerns about like writing up contracts and things like that, it is also potentially more distanced from that because there are cases of like donation and giving that don't necessarily require the same sort of written contract structure that you always
now you're
do.
giving it, that's an interesting explanation. Now you're giving it, I like that explanation. It's not, I don't think it's what the
I don't think that's what one of these sources is saying. I do think that is like one potential rationale that, and again,
I think you're right, that you're not, it's sufficiently different because you're probably not going to write a contract when you give this thing. I mean, but I'm interested in, if you, in defending the Magen Avraham, maybe from the kasha of Rav Moshe. Joel, you have something?
I think there's a difference between something that's owned by lots of people versus something that's owned by every Jew, right? There's that one, I mean, it could even be the thing is it's every Jew minus one is different than every Jew, right? It becomes a communal good at that point, and therefore it moves itself outside of the realm of normal sale law. And it's the fact that even though I have a chelik in it, it's not the same thing as like I just have a shutafut with somebody else on an object.
Right. I have no special chelik in it, as distinguished from any other Jew.
Exactly.
I think that comes back to my question.
Okay, I buy that. That makes sense.
Moshe might be thinking it's like what was meant was the division between the shul members, which would be a literal chelik. And when you realize it's between all Jewish people, it's a lot less like a real chelik in a
right. Maybe he's just bothered by the words, by mamash the words, like gam kein chelek bo. You're just bothered by those words. Why did the Magen Avraham say he's got a chelek in it? That's not the factor. The factor is that it's a klali thing, that it's to call Yisrael. Why specify? And he's got a chelek in it also. He said both things. He said it's for all of Yisrael. V'yesh l'makdish gam kein chelek bo. Because it's of all Yisrael, therefore he has a chelek, and therefore it never went out of his reshut. And if you go back to the kolbo, you can see it it's almost hard to read it any other way. He says in the kolbo, he says, Mutter lefish adayin ein miyachad. I'm reading the kolbo. Ein miyachadim shum davar sheyotze mirishutan. You see, the question is, what words do you emphasize? Do you emphasize the words shum davar, that there's nothing actually happening because it's just a pledge? Or do you emphasize the idea that sheyotze mirishutan, that it doesn't go out of their possession because it stays in their possession because it's something that's shayach to Klal Yisrael? All right, let's see how the Mishnah Berurah understands. I think the Mishnah Berurah, he's written before this Igros Moshe, but I think he kind of answers it. I think, as I recall, when I read it before. Let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. So Kaf Zayin. Here, Joel. Since you're our Mishnah Berurah guy, why don't you read Kaf Zayin?
I'm on mute. Sorry. Kaf Zayin. In the Mishnah Berurah, here we go. Lisok staka.
Yeah.
All right, great. Laniim olevei knesset. This was actually okay to the poor people or to the big knesset. All right, because there's a point in the next Magen Avraham, I think, right? What if you give it to the Chazan, he's rich, right? There's a whole thing there. But maybe we're going to do that. I'll bake Knesset. So maybe I donate some sort of object for the Beit Knesset.
Oh, that's our case. That's the nafkamina case, right? According to the Rabbeinu Hanan Rabbi Asur, according to the kolbo, it might be mutar.
Mm-hmm. So, gam ken ogim halam lekel, right? Everyone's leaning about this. The alpha gav di amrinan, ein marichim, right? I know them lamar erech ploni alai. Not actually saying that. Ve'ein makdishin b'Shabbat, right? It could eat the common b'siman Siman 10. Okay, so it is the exact same problem we saw already back in the Beit Yosef that was brought up. Hainu davka hekdesh mizbech ol leverek habayit. Like the shot didan mutar. We saw the same thing in the Magen Avraham. So the ein shem hekdesh alehem elachulin, and right. This is not. I'm not giving them to the Beit HaMikdash. I'm giving them.
This is a slightly different answer. This is a slightly different answer. He's saying it's not technically hektish. It's just still chulin. He's sort of explaining maybe the Magen Avraham. He's saying it's still chulin, and the prohibition is just on hektish. Okay, mikom makom. So let's be careful. Let's be worry about the opinion. Was that the kolbo that it's I can't remember. I mixed up the opinions. So if it's a davar yadua, oh, that would be the Rabbeinu Hanan.
Thank you. Yeah. Could go on Sefer Torah, Torah Sefer Torah. Shiaktishenu befiv me'erev Shabbat afilu beino levein atzmo. So
here we have a very interesting. We have a very interesting heter. You're makdish it. You're planning on bringing it to the shul. Say before
Shabbos.
Before Shabbat, I am makdish this for the shul.
So.
Vaz.
ואז אפילו מביאו בשבת לבית הכנסת, אינו אלא מפרסם ההקדש שהקדיש בערב שבת. But I'm just letting people know what I did on Friday.
Right. So he's saying better to do this. But wait, there's two things I want to say. First of all, he's giving an explanation of how to get out of the problem. Do it before Shabbat. And he also said, like I said before, that our makdishim are not chulin, which by that I understood that he's trying to say that the prohibition of makdish is specifically to the temple, which is kind of the way that we tried to explain the Beit Yosef originally last week, actually. All right, we go on. V'lifsok.
V'lifsok ma'ot listakav v'lo chefetz yadua mutar afilu lechatchila b'Shabbat lechulei amot. But to actually just have it be money, a pledge of money, everyone thinks that's okay. Why? Diatam de'asur laktish hu mishum dehave kemekach umekar shemotzi hachefetz mershuto l'rshut acher.
Mamish like the Beit Yosef, mamish like the Magen Avraham.
Exactly. So b'maot, right? That doesn't. Money is not the same thing. It's not changing ownership in the same way from one reshut to the next when I'm pledging money. We have this in general.
You don't sell money to people.
Exactly. Money is a way to
unless you're a money changer. A money changer might do that, but he's not even then. He's not really selling money. He's exchanging. He's getting different kind of money.
But as Perek HaZahav, Vehu adin kishe'enu me'ached hachefetz b'Shabbat. Rak kishomer stam ani menader Sefer Torah. Right? If I don't say like I'm going to give this Sefer Torah, I'm just like I'm going to give a Sefer Torah. Right? That's the same thing. Even if you have a Torah in your actual house, everyone thinks it's okay. Because the thing hasn't actually left my reshut because I didn't say that Sefer Torah in my house. I just said I'm going to give a Sefer Torah. And so therefore it wasn't a particular one. So nothing has changed reshut at that point.
So it's very interesting, by the way. I think it's interesting here. You see how the Mishnah Berurah sort of pulls together all the different opinions that we've seen. He brings together the Beit Yosef and the Magen Avraham, and he gives also some extra way to avoid problems, which you wouldn't really appreciate if you just read him. Just read him, you just say, oh, he's just saying nice, okay, he's bringing halachas. But now we see what he did, the work he did. Okay, let's go on. That's Vav. We got to go further, and we are going to go further. So Zion. I think, wait, let me just check if there was something I wanted to say. Yeah, that's it, Zion. Now Zion. Oh, finally on some new material. Who would like to read Zion? Yeah. Okay, Max, go for it.
Mutar limdod b'Shabbat medida shel mitzvah, kagon limdod im yesh b'mikvah 40 se'ah, ulimdod ezor mishu choleh, ve'lilchosh alav kmo shenohagot hanashim, mutar tehavim medida shel mitzvah. So you can measure on Shabbos for the purposes of a mitzvah, like making sure there's enough water in the mikvah, or I was trying to figure out what exactly is, I mean, some sort of incantation that would be whispered for a sick person.
Yeah, so it's like this. This is the way I figured it out, at least. So
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding is like this, and you'll tell me if you agree or not. But I think they used to do, if you had a person had a terrible headache, they would like take like a belt, a zor as a belt, and they would like measure out above his head, like, I don't know, 4 amot this way, and 4 amot that way, and 4 amot that way, and 4 amot the other way. In every direction, they would measure it in the air, sort of above his head, and they would say, "You're healed." And that would work, or hopefully it would work. So it wasn't a real, so wait a second. So what do we say? Mutar limdod b'Shabbat medida shel mitzvah, kagon limdod im yesh b'mikvah 40 se'ah, v'limdod ezor is a belt. V'limdod ezor mi shehu choleh. Now this is this thing, limdod ezor means measuring with this belt. With mi shehu choleh v'lilchosh alav, I guess you say, you whispered on him, you know, your headache should go away. Kamosh sheno go to nashim umuter dahave medida shel mitzvah. Actually, we should look. Wait, go back to the Beit. Read it in the Beit Yosef, because it's a little bit different in the Beit. Not the Beit Yosef, in the Tur. Look in Tur and Zion, or I'll read Tur Zion. Muter limdod medida shel mitzvah b'Shabbat kagon limdod im yesh b'mikvah 40 se'ah. That's the same. V'lachash shemelchishin al ke'ev rosh shelochin ezoro. They take his belt. Umodidim bo shalosh amot. Sorry, it was not 3. It was not 4. It's 3. Shalosh amot v'shalosh pa'amim v'omer halachash al medida. And they say some kind of whisper on this measuring. Avia Ezri Haravya hetiru. Why? Demishum lachash lecha. Because first of all, there's no problem of lachash. Shemuter l'chosh b'Shabbat, because that's permitted on Shabbat. Umishum medida nami lecha. Why is not medida? The mitasek hu etzel medida. It's mitasek in regard to the medida. This is a little bit weird what that means. It's mitasek. He's doing it. He's not know what he's doing. I think what he means is, I'm not measuring for the sake of measuring. I don't really care how many air particles are in the 3 amot. I'm not trying to measure anything, really. I'm doing the act of measuring. It looks like I'm measuring, but it's a fictional act. I'm not really measuring an item. I'm just doing as though I'm measuring. So it's mitasek hu etzel medida. I'm not really trying to measure anything. I'm just doing the act of measuring. That's what I understand. But the Rav Moshe ushered it. Rav Meir Rottenberg haya midame oto lemedida shel mitzvah. So Rav Meir Rottenberg, our friend, he says it's a mitzvah. In fact, it's domed a mitzvah. Now, if you look at the Shulchan Aruch, he just says dahave medida shel mitzvah. It is a medida of mitzvah. He grasped with 2 hands Rav Meir Rottenberg as the final psak. Okay. So yeah. So look here. Maybe you want to read also again, Max, the Magen Avram. Tet Vav, but really, let's just skip a little bit. Katav ha Marshal in the Yam Shel Shlomo, right? You see that? Katav ha Yam Shel Shlomo?
Yeah. Parakeh Beitza.
Yes, exactly.
Okay. Hachrazat ha.
Oh, I'm sorry. This is in the previous thing. I guess I'm going to skip this because we don't have time. Actually, it's not. It's actually important. All right. Well, we'll skip it. Go to Tet Vav. Tet Zayin. Sorry.
Okay. Just from the top?
Yeah, from the top.
Okay. והוא הדין למדוד חור אם יש בו פותח טפח והטומאה נכנסת שם, אף אגב יכול לצאת מהבית, מכל מקום, כיוון שמודד שיעורי תורה, לא הווה עובדא דחול, לא הווה עובדא דחול. Okay, so the same goes, this is a comparison to the mikvah, with measuring for the purposes of whether tumah is going to enter into a certain area.
Right. In other words, if the hole is too small, then the tumah won't go through. But if it's the right size, then the tumah will go through. And you don't want to be in a house that's tummy. If you're a kohen, let's say you're a kohen, and you need to get out of the house, so you need to know, is the tumah coming through? So he says, can you measure on Shabbos im yesh bo potech tefach, if it has a tefach, that tumah nichneset sham. Afagav deyachol tzeit me'abayit, even though, what's the problem? Let him go out of the house. Mikol makom kevan shemodedim shiur Torah, since he's measuring a Torah measurement, lo have uvda dechol. Oh, so now we're seeing that measuring is uvda dechol, but this is not uvda dechol, because it's a mitzvah. It's a measurement of mitzvah-related things. It's not a mitzvah to measure. I could go out of the house. But it's a mitzvah-type activity. So it's no longer similar to chulin. It's a kodesh thing. I'm involved in mitzvot. All right. V'kasav atosvos.
Okay. Yeah. V'kadvu atosvot. Sof perek yud zayin. Dedavka medida de lo havi isur kol kach. Ela mishum de havi ku'uvde dechol. Ulahachi share b'makom mitzvah. Aval milei acharina lo.
Okay, stop there. So he says, the Tosfos says that medida is not such a big isser. It's just uvda dechol. Remember, you're asking like, what is it? Right, like Rav Landy said, mechak u'memchar is because of writing, but measuring is because of this more fuzzy kind of thing. Uvda dechol, just like, like putting your Shabbos, you're putting your TV on a Shabbos clock. So that would be like uvda dechol. It's not right because it's a holdik thing. Ulahachi shar b'makom mitzvah. So therefore, in a makom mitzvah, we're going to let you. In other words, don't think that every rabbinic prohibition, if it's a mitzvah, you can do it. Like Amir La'akum, you can't just, because it's a mitzvah, tell a goy to do something. Now let's look at Rav Moshe. Yeah, this is a very nice Rav Moshe. Who would like to read this nice Rav Moshe? This is on Sif Zayin.
I can read.
Wait, but Noam also offered, so I'll get Noam.
Sif Zayin?
Yeah, you can skip the first paragraph because that's just quoting.
Okay. Ledivrei Amagen Avraham.
Yeah.
Okay, Ledivrei Amagen Avraham Gabe Medida Imsa Shegam Beyachol Limdod Hamikva Ukadome Beshiurei Torah Bachol Lachara Shabbat Mishum de Yetzarich Lehamikva Bachol Rak Achara Zman Shiaspiku Limdod Gam Ken Mutar.
All right, explain.
So according to the Magen Avraham, with regards to measurement, it turns out that this is also when you're able to measure the water in the mikvah and other similar measurements of the Torah on Chol. Because this is a case where you're going to need the mikvah on Chol. It's not totally coming together for me. I'm not.
Yeah, this is a bit hard. It's very interesting. He says it. I'll give a shot. He says Nimsa comes out according to the Magen Avraham. Shigambi yacholim dot a mikveh. Now, even in a case where you could have measured the mikveh after Shabbat, la'achar Shabbat, because you only need it after Shabbat, right? Mishum de tzarich the mikveh b'chol. You don't need it after Shabbat. Rak achar zman sheyaspiku limdod, and you only need it even not immediately after Shabbat. You need it like many hours after Shabbat. Gam ken yeh mutar to measure it on Shabbat. Why? Because what did he say? He said, since you're doing a medidah shel, the Magen Avraham said you're doing a medidah shel mitzvah, so it's no longer uvda dechol. So you could go around measuring mikvahs all day. You could just enjoy mikvah measuring and go on Shabbat and measure mikvahs, or you could count threads of tzitzit. I don't know. Well, you could do all kinds of any kind of measuring you wanted to do that was regarding mitzvot. You could do even if you had no tzorech for it. In other words, Rav Moshe is asking, what happened to tzorech? Tzorech Shabbat. Is this only when it's tzorech Shabbat? The Magen Avraham didn't say it's tzorech Shabbat. He just says, and actually it's a very correct reading of the Magen Avraham. That's what he means even. If you go back and you look at the Magen Avraham, he says, it's a slight avera, it's a slight problem, it's only uvda dechol. And he says, in other words, since you're involved in doing a mitzvah, even though it's not tzorech Shabbat, it never mentions the word tzorech Shabbat. And so Rav Moshe says, Minalanze. He goes on, V'lachora Minalanze. He's saying that what the Magen Avraham is saying is that once it becomes an activity of mitzvah, then it becomes a holy kind of activity. It's no longer uvda dechol. It's no longer a non-holy thing. And therefore, why would there be a prohibition against doing it on Shabbat? And he says, Menalanze, the lechora hu mutter af she'enut litzorach Shabbat. I'm just reading on in the Rav Moshe. He says, where does he get this from? Even if it's not litzorach Shabbat, aval rakim ayri shelo yaspiku limdod b'chol. The only time that you could measure a mikvah on Shabbat is if there wouldn't be enough time after Shabbat to measure it. Kagon shetzarich tekev achar Shabbat. For example, if you need right away after Shabbat, shezeh mutar lachshich al tchum. Just like it's mutar lachshich al tchum, you could measure on Shabbat your mikveh if you need it right away after Shabbat. Aval k'sheyachol limdod achar Shabbat, yesh lesor. But if you could measure it and have plenty of time after Shabbat to go into the mikveh, then why would we permit you to do this on Shabbat? It's asur. Kevan de'en tzorech la mitzvah sheim dedu b'Shabbat. Ein lachshiv medidah Shabbat lemedidat mitzvah. It's not a medidah of mitzvah. It's true. It's a halachic medidah, but it's not a mitzvah medidah because you could do it after Shabbat. It's a mitzvah sheyachol lasot acharei Shabbat. V'zeh yachol litzeit me'abayit. But the Magen Avraham had a proof. He said you could go out of the house. So we're seeing what was the Magen Avraham's proof? I mean, what Moshe is just pointing out. You could read this Magen Avraham and not understand what he's saying. But what was his proof from this Tuma? The proof of the Tuma was saying that you see that you can measure it even though you don't really need to measure it. It's not a tzorech Shabbat. It's not a tzorech Shabbat. Let the Kohen leave the house, go to another house. It's not a tzorech for Shabbat. So you see, why is it permitted to measure this whole Tuma? Because it's a mitzvah type of measuring, and therefore it's not a whole type of activity, and therefore it's permitted on Shabbat, even if you don't need it. That was the Magen Avraham. And so Rav Moshe has to answer for that. And he says, that's not called efshar. Everybody wants to stay at home. Nobody wants to have to go to his friend's house. He wants to do that yoter miligalot etzel acherim. He doesn't want to knock on the door of his neighbor and say, "Hi, can I live in your house for this Shabbat? Because there might be a dead body coming into my tomb of a dead body coming into my house." He'd rather stay home. And therefore it is tzorech Shabbat. And that's the only time that medidah is permitted. V'lechen tzarich iyun divrei Magen Avraham b'travayhu. In both matters. The first matter, ha'echad she'egdir she'yachol litzeit me'abayit k'she'efshar lo below medidah. that which he said that you could leave the house, he doesn't agree. I don't agree with that, says Rav Moshe. You can't leave the house. Nobody wants to leave their house. V'asheni she'etir limdod shiur Torah gam kishe'ein medidat tzorach, and that he permitted even measuring without need. So I think that's interesting. In other words, he's sort of teaching you how to read the Magen Avraham. You could have read it and not even got this point, but this is what the Magen Avraham is really saying. He's saying, I mean, even if you don't agree with Rav Moshe, I mean, agree with him, not agree with him, what's the Magen Avraham saying? He's saying, it's clearly that he's saying that once you're doing a medidah in the realm of mitzvahs, even if it's not for tzorach Shabbat, it'll get be mutter. Questions? Comments?
And so he's being more machmir. He's disagreeing with the Magen Avraham.
Oh yeah, Rav Moshe is disagreeing. He's saying no, it's only for tzorach Shabbos.
Right.
Now the tshuva I gave you, which we're not going to read, he says about measuring temperature of a child on Shabbat. Rav Moshe says permitted, because that's tzorach Shabbat. Question, Ori.
It reminds me of what we were looking at with the Chazan, where now I'm thinking that what Rav Moshe meant there was like, is it tzorach mitzvah to hire a Chazan? We don't need, right? It's not, there's no need for the Chazan to time this mitzvah. We can do it without him. It's just another thing, right? So it's not mitzvah in his book.
It's the opposite. It's sort of like Rav Moshe is saying the opposite, because there he was saying we don't need him. It's and here he's saying you do need to be in your house on Shabbat. In other words, he could have said it's a need to have a good chazan on Shabbat. Nobody wants to have a bad chazan on Shabbat. And maybe that's not what you were saying.
No, I mean, he said the opposite, and he challenged it for the same reason I'm saying, because for him, a dvar mitzvah on Shabbat is a tzorach mitzvah on Shabbat. It's a mekayim this mitzvah. There's a pressing need of, and I think you were saying with it.
Exactly.
Okay.
Okay. Well, I understand what you're saying. Very nice, Ori. What you're saying.
It's not a pressing need. It has to do with the mitzvah, but it's not a tzorech mitzvah.
In other words, okay, so I like what you're saying. Let me say again what you're saying. What you're saying is Rav Moshe, as opposed to the Magen Avraham, has a very tight definition of tzorech Shabbat. And his tight definition is you can only do things that are a mamish need or a tzorech of a mitzvah. It has to be necessary, it has to be required, not just that once it's mitzvah related, it's permitted. In like the Chazan, it's mitzvah related. I'm paying, he's doing a mitzvah, so it's mitzvah related. Yeah, but is the paying needed? No. And here too, he's saying, is the medidah needed? Then it shouldn't be permitted if it's not needed. He believes, right. He very nice. Very nice. I think that's the right way to think about it.
But why is he so much more machmir if others are saying that? Meaning, it makes sense. This kind of comes back to the chefsei shamayim question. It makes sense. It made sense to us. I guess it depends what the case is, but it's taking, once it's a dvar mitzvah, it's sort of, we expected it to take us out of chafatzecha. Where Moshe is talking really about competing needs, which is different.
I don't understand what you mean by competing needs.
Like a tzorach Shabbat is a pressing matter which can make something mutter, because it's tzorach mitzvah, as opposed to saying, in some of these cases, a dvar mitzvah is chafsei shamayim. It's going to relate. It doesn't. There's no isser in the first place because this is something that's not against the Shabbat spirit. It seems like almost like a completely different idea, I guess.
Right. Magen Avraham is saying that why is it that, I mean, I like what the Magen Avraham is saying. He's saying why is it that that measuring is forbidden or that paying is forbidden? It's because it takes you into the realm of your workaday week. And once it's mitzvah related, then you're in a holy world. And therefore, Yeshayahu, the Navi, never had any problem with that. If you're measuring mitzvah. Rav Moshe is saying, no, Yeshayahu is trying to create a Shabbos, everything you're doing is related to Shabbos in particular, not just holy things. Because you could be a yeshiva bacher who's all the time doing holy things and never involved in work, but that's still Shabbos is different. It's a question of what Yishaya was trying to do. Yeah, Joel, what do you got?
I think, not that I should say this, but Rav Moshe is overreading it. Magen Avraham, as far as I can tell, he's not saying that you don't need Tzarech also. He's just saying that he's trying to explain why Shvut bimkom mitzvah is not permissible on Shabbat. And he's like, and this is, and Medida is. He's like, because Medida doesn't rise to the level of Shvut. Right? He's not saying.
How do you explain the Tuma case? Why did he bring the Tuma case? And why did he say the Yaakov take me abayit?
There's still a Tzorach Shabbat, right? It's like, because you could leave the house, but I want to sit. It's exactly like Rav Moshe said, how I understood Magen Avraham. He's like, yeah, I could leave the house. My preference on Shabbat is to stay in the house, right? And this is why I'm allowed to do it, even though I'd have another thing another way around it besides doing Medida. But he's not saying that if there's no Tzorach.
I don't know. Look at it. The Yachol Etzeit Me'abayit Mikol Makom Kevin Shemoded Shiur Torah Lo Have Uvda Dechol. He could go out of the house. That's already saying, therefore, it's not a tzorach. And then he says, Mikol Makom, nevertheless, is permitted because it's a medida of mitzvah, and therefore it comes out of the category of the chol.
Yeah, but it's not a tzorach as in like I necessarily have to do it, but it's still a tzorach Shabbat because I want to stay in my house for Shabbat. I think it's exactly what Rav Moshe is saying, actually. And I don't think Magen Avraham means to say that I could just like measure the mikvah because I'm going to use it on Tuesday, right? I think he means you're going to use it like on Shabbos.
I'm happy that you didn't read the Magen Avraham the way Rav Moshe did, just like I didn't read him the way Rav Moshe did. But after I see the Rav Moshe, I see that he's 100% right. To me, it's totally in the words exactly. That's his whole point. Once it becomes, I mean, if you would have asked him, did he really mean that you could just do it? You could run around all day measuring things for fun? He maybe would say, no, you shouldn't do that. But maybe in the back of his mind, he's thinking that you do need this thing. But he does. But his point, the reason why it's mutter is because it's not because of Tzorech Shabbat. It's not because it's a Tzorech Shabbat. He never says that. It's because this act is no longer uvda dechol, and therefore why should it be forbidden? And therefore there's no.
I really think
not like it's usher, but we're going to permit it. It's like there's no reason to even forbid it because it's not uvda dechol. So what's the prohibition? Why should it be usher?
I think his point is that it's not aval mile achrina la or low, right? I think that's his entire point. It's like, why can't I do a shvut bimkom mitzvah? And then his agenda there has nothing to do with like saying you could just go measuring things. If it's for mitzvah, who cares what it's for? I think his point is to say people who, because remember we've seen this earlier. Some people say that shvut bimkom mitzvah is mutar, and even though we paskin shvut to shvut, and he's trying to fight that. Because people can say, well, look, medidas proof bimkom mitzvah shvut is mutar. It's like that's not shvut. That's why. I don't know. I feel like Moshe's overreading him a little bit, but.
Here, let's look at the Mishnah Berurah. See if the Mishnah Berurah can clear us up. Vav. Here, Lamed Dalid in the Mishnah Berurah. Medida shel mitzvah. Va'afal gav de lo hutar shvut afilu b'makom mitzvah. Even though rabbinical prohibitions are not permitted even when it's for a mitzvah, still a rabbinical prohibition. You need something else to permit it. You need something more than just it's a mitzvah. K'moshe katuv la'el Siman b'sifkaten kafchet. Shani medida de lo havde iser kol kach. That it's not an iser at all. It's not such a big iser. Ela mishum da have ku'uv de dechol. V'lahachi shari b'makom mitzvah. He uses the words b'makom mitzvah, the same words that he used by the Chazan, like Ori pointed out. The same words that he used b'makom mitzvah, that Rav Moshe didn't say, well, why is that a makom mitzvah? It's not a tzorech mitzvah, maybe a makom mitzvah, Rav Moshe said, but it's not a tzorech mitzvah. He says, but this is a makom mitzvah. By the way, you again see that the Mishnah Berurah is just summarizing very succinctly the Magen Avraham. Lamed Hey. I mean, I don't know if that answers who's right or who's wrong, Joel, you or I, but maybe I don't know. Lamed hey, v'kagon limdod, v'hu adin de mutter limdod chor, sheyesh bekotel, hamaspik im yesh bo poteach tefach, lahavi tuma me'acheder, shahamet bo, right? Lecheder asamuchlo, to the next room. V'afal gav the yachol hakohanim litzeit mimenu. But the kohanim could just walk out. Mikom makom, kevan shemoded shurei Torah lo mixi keduv de dechol. Now, do you agree with Reb Moshe? He says, kevan, since you're measuring a Torah type measurement, it doesn't look like an uvda dechol. Nobody will think this is a holidic activity. They don't know they don't know that there's actually kohanim there necessarily. He didn't talk about the tzarech of the kohanim. He says, even though they could go somewhere else. You can measure shishim to see its batal. Kevan dehu lehitlamed al derek horah, to learn or to teach, maybe. To teach the psak. Lo this is prima gadim. We should really look there, because what does he mean? Does he mean measuring an actual case, or does he just mean learning the halacha?
I think he means just like practicing what does 160 look like. Right?
So then for sure it's not Tzarech Shabbos.
Fair.
But wait a second. Shel mitzvah. What's the next Mishnah? Lamed Vav. To have a medida shel mitzvah. It's a little bit weird that he says it's that measuring in the air to help a person with a headache is a mitzvah. I was surprised by that, because we just said that's one opinion. That was the Rav Meir Rottenberg. Shel mitzvah. Mitzvah. Why? The medida refuahi. V'refuat haguf mitzvahi. It's a mitzvah to heal people. And then why don't we do it on Shabbos? So wait a second, we don't do it on Shabbos, so we should always do it on Shabbos. We don't do it on Shabbos. Gezerah shchikat smamanim. Maybe you'll make medicine, you'll grind up herbs. Lo shayech bezeh ela b'refuah sheyesh bo mamash. That's only in real refuah. Kagon mashke. Now you're giving him a potion, or ochel, or food. But just doing things in the air, you're not going to come to ever grind things. You're doing magical refuah. So why in the New Testament does it say that they got angry at Jesus for healing the dead, the leprous person on Shabbos? He didn't use any. He didn't use a potion.
The New Testament didn't have the Mishnah Berurah.
Apparently.
They were more firm.
They were what?
They were more firm.
They were more firm than Mishnah Berurah. Yes, the rabbis.
But
right.
That's really interesting. That refuah, like, it's usually asur, but then like when it's not, in a case like this, it's not just that it's mutar; it's actually a mitzvah. It's like a big gap.
Right, it becomes a mitzvah because it's always a mitzvah that when a doctor on a Wednesday who heals somebody is doing a mitzvah, so it's a mitzvah, right? You're right. It is a big gap. Yeah, refuah on Shabbos is a big thing. It's a big thing. It's like, because if you're a little little bit sick, then you can't do it. This is all these levels. It's a big topic. I want to learn it later on this year. There is just one other thing that I want to, in the 2 minutes that we have left, I just want to look at one other thing at the end of Lamed Gimel, really with the previous Siman, Sif. If you look at the Mishnah Berurah, remember remember we earlier saw in the Mishnah Berurah that he said you could makdish it before Shabbat, right? You could makdish it before Shabbat for the Beit Knesset and then bring it. You didn't really do anything on Shabbat. If you look at Lamed Gimel, Let's read Lamed Gimel. I'll read Lamed Gimel. He says, "Lifsok tzedakah va'afilu chazan ashir." What about if the chazan is very rich? Can you give him a gift? Kevan shenotnim lo ze kedei sheyitpalel lifnei ha'amud have tzorich mitzvah. That's called tzorich mitzvah, not like Rav Moshe. Be'inyan hachrazat mitzvah bebeit haKnesset. Oh, I'm sorry, we didn't do that. Oh, all right, well. Yesh osrim. Sorry, I'm just thinking of something. Yesh osrim. So what about making like hachrazat mitzvah, doing like a mechira pombit, doing an auction off of mitzvahs in the temple? Yesh osrim, v'yesh matirim. Delo shayich mechaku memchar ela bechefetz anikne. Why do they matir mechira pombit in the Beit Knesset? Because the only thing that's forbidden is something that's similar to mechaku memchar, but here there's no chefetz. There's no item being sold. There's just a mitzvah. If the people are lenient, don't get angry at them. Don't tell them to stop. But you can't buy a place in the city. You can't buy your seat on Shabbos or buy an etrog. V'ken liknot shofar or etrog b'yom tov min hamocher. That's for sure asur. V'ayin lekaman v'hine mechachu memchar echad b'peh ve'echad b'mesira asur. But actually giving something, whether it's a gift or purchase, right? Okay, let me read it again. Hine mechachu memchar, sales echad b'peh ve'echad b'mesira. Sorry. If you buy things, whether you do it just, I hereby sell you my house for $100 and afterwards you give it to me, or I actually do Masira, Echad Masira. Well, what does Masira mean? Echad bepev, Echad Masira. I guess you actually hand it. Asur Gezer Shem Yavolik Tov. Like Rav Landis said. Maybe you'll come to right. V'gam Asur liten matana lechavero. You can't even give a gift to your friend on Shabbat. Sometimes people come to a house on Shabbos and they bring a salad bowl or towels or something. They don't want to just bring a bottle of wine. They want to bring like a gift, a physical item. He says, Asur liten matana lechavero. Didame lemechaku memchar. Because now it's like mechaku memchar because it's a physical item. Shaharei yotzei mereshuto. It goes out of his reshut. Ela de matana mutar kishahu l'tzorach Shabbos. But if the matana is for tzorach Shabbos, you need it like a bottle of wine, you're going to use it. Maybe you use a salad bowl. I guess you should use it if they give it to you. It should be the tzorach. Tzorach Shabbos v'yam tov, k'moshe katav Siman kaf gimel. Now, if you put, so fine. So he's saying you can't really give a gift on Shabbat. You can't. He also talks about like, what about that they give bar mitzvah boy a book. Anyway, if you put this together with the previous thing about before Shabbat, so what some people do is they, before Shabbat, they give this thing to they announce. Well, the Mishnah Berurah said you can just announce that I'm going to give this to the Beit Knesset. So maybe you can announce that I'm going to give it to Ploni and then give it to him on Shabbat. Now, what's even better, or maybe even correct, is to have a third party involved, and that I give it to Reuven, and I say, Reuven, zoche in this gift for Shimon, that I'm going to give it to Shimon on Shabbat, because you can zoche la'adam shelo b'fanav.
And that's the minhag.
And that's the minhag, so that you...
That's the minhag. It's important to say.
Yeah, that's what you should do. That is the minhag. In other words, you before Shabbat, if you want to give a salad bowl to somebody on Shabbos, you go to a third party and say, Reuven, be zoche in this salad bowl for the people, because you're allowed to acquire something for somebody who, even though he's not there, because people like gifts, even though it says Soni Matanot Yichyeh. There's one other Magen Avram that I wanted to see, but maybe Joel will learn it. All right. We did a lot. We didn't do everything. But I think we did some major things. The measuring is a major thing. The gifts is a major thing. And the work on Shabbos is a major thing. Okay, so next week we're going to go on to Amira La'akum with Joel and Lexi.
What Siman is that?
That's the next Siman. Shin Zayin.
Insane.
We
Yeah,
will hope-
Shkoyach, thank you very much.
Nachum,
Well,
how many
Yeah.
weeks do we get on it?
I already gave you 2 weeks.
He was 2. Okay, good.
Yeah, you can still have 2 weeks.
All right.
It's an important. I think it's a very important Siman, especially for rabbis to know, because people are going to ask a lot about this kind of question. You know, they have Filipino, they have a Shabbos Goy in the shul, Filipino or Filipina in Israel. In Israel, that's in Israel for some reason that is the word that you use to describe a helper, even though he may not be from the Philippines. As far as I know.
Yikes.
Questions?
Yeah. Thank you.
Shkoyach.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Why can't I press this button?